Okay, hello. Today I'm going to be discussing all of the books that I read in August. My name is Sarah. Welcome to my channel. I don't anticipate posting much besides maybe like these monthly wrap-ups, but I kind of wanted to just start doing this so I can remember all of the books that I read in that month, because the more I look at my bookshelf, the more I forget when I read certain books. So let's get started. I took some notes, so if you see me looking over here, that's what I'm doing. And I'm also trying out this audio thing for the first time, so if it's weird, then I'm sorry. Okay, so I started the month with reading The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. This is about toad, badger, mole, and who else? And the rat, the water rat. And it's just them having a time in the woods. And I wanted to read this because it's been on my bookshelf for about 7 years. I bought it in middle school, I guess like 8 years now. I really enjoyed it. I loved the ride at Disneyland, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. My friends, when I went with them, found it very terrifying, but I think that this is a wonderful book to base a ride off of. I believe that Toad is one of the original anti-heroes. You can't help but root for him, even though he very much deserved to go to prison for stealing a motor car. But you just sympathize with him and understand that he's just fascinated by the new technology. I found all of the characters very endearing, and I also thought that this book is a good introduction to direct characterization. Like, each animal, their natural traits, without them being anthropomorphized, kind of play into their personality. Like the badger's a bit morose and a solitary creature. You know, the mole is pretty adventurous, and, you know, the rat is similar, but they all kind of have a bias towards the environment that they grew up in, and whenever they get lost, it's in an environment that they're not familiar with. So I thought that was a good way to directly characterize characters by using their instinctive animal traits as part of their personality. It was a very easy read. It's about 160 pages, at least my Barnes & Noble Classic copy. The cover is quite lovely. And yeah, I would recommend. This is definitely a book I want to read to my future children. I think that it's a good bedtime story. So I'm going to keep this copy for that day. Okay. The next book I read was 5/4 of an Orange by Joanne Harris. This is a book I had a copy of for about 2 years. I picked it up at a thrift store in Santa Cruz when I was visiting, and I just donated my copy, not even kidding, like an hour ago, because I forgot that I had put it in the pile, and it's now at my Goodwill. So apologies that I don't have the physical copy with me. But if that tells you anything about what I thought of it, that I immediately donated it upon reading it. This book was set in post-war France, like post-World War II France, but it's blended with flashbacks from the wartime, and it's in a more remote French town, so the war wasn't as like directly felt. Definitely the waves of it, but they weren't like directly bombed or anything, from my understanding. Mind you, it's a fictional town, so. And it follows a young girl into her being an elder, and she's kind of reliving the events that happened in her childhood. It's a lot about, you know, what is forbidden, what is allowed, the secrets that her family were keeping, that she was keeping, and it follows her, you know, descendants kind of wanting parts of that story, and she refused to relinquish it until it was her time. So it's set in France in the small village of Les Lavoussais on the Loire, Frambois. That's the main character. She kind of relives her childhood with her mother and her 2 siblings, who were all victims of her mother's abuse, mostly verbal abuse, and just the risks that their mother took to keep them safe, which was lost upon them in childhood. So I thought there was a reveal at the end. There was kind of like, you know, culminating what the secret was. And I found it to be a bit unsatisfying just because I was distracted by kind of the way it seemed a bit sympathetic to the Nazi cause, I found, which I construed was from the perspective of this innocent girl growing up during a war which she doesn't understand. There were German soldiers in her town. She doesn't know why. She doesn't know why they're targeting Jewish people, but they do kind of prey upon her and her siblings to give them information about the Jewish people in their town. It can be, perceived that she's just this innocent, ignorant child, but sometimes it genuinely came off as, they were sympathetic to Nazis because the Frambois was in love with this soldier. Obviously, they had a huge age gap and it wasn't going to work, but there was a lot of sympathy for him, even though he was very much not abandoning his post or anything like that. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I finished it. The characters I cared enough to see what happened to them, but I don't think I would recommend it to anybody, and I immediately donated it back into the world, so that tells you anything. The next book that I read was Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. It's essays about Dolly's exploration in her, romantic and sexual life, her upbringing, going to college, watching family and friends achieve these milestones that we're all conditioned to believe are markers of a set, fulfilled life. Wasn't, meeting those milestones, and it's kind of about her dissatisfaction and fear about aging and not achieving things that she felt she should achieve. As she grew older, she gained insight into the importance of platonic relationships. So much of this book follows her relationship with her good friend from childhood. I found that the personal essays that were blended with these vignettes of recipes that she made during college and fictional emails that were very funny. I thought that was a good blend and kind of broke up the more serious essays about life and mortality and aging and, self-esteem issues, going to therapy, things like that. It definitely touches on deeper topics such as those, including eating disorders, death of a loved one, and like I said, self-esteem issues. But I felt that it did it in a way that was very digestible and light. It wasn't difficult to read about those things because I think she's writing from a time that is so far removed from the way that she felt then. So she has a lot more wisdom and understanding of the temporality of those situations. But I found this to be a very easy read of a memoir. I can make a video maybe about all the memoirs that I love because that is one of my favorite genres. I think it goes beyond autobiography in the sense that it touches upon the emotions, it connects to childhood, all of those things. And I think there's also more room for kind of genre exploration, but maybe I'll discuss that in the other video. What I did find interesting was how British it was. As an American, there were certain phrases that were lost on me. One that I was telling my friend is hen do, which is a bachelorette party. If without the context, I would not have known what that was. So that's maybe something to be aware of if you're going to read this, but I don't think it really disrupted my reading experience. I just had to kind of gather some more context clues to understand certain events. I would recommend this. I think all women would benefit from recognizing the importance of their platonic and even familial relationships. It allows you to realize what you may need from a romantic relationship, what can that provide you that you can't already get from your platonic and familial relationships. So definitely a good read. I enjoyed it. The fourth book that I read this month, the one that took me the most time, it took me about 10 days to read this book, is Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. This book was wonderful. I knew it was going to be wonderful because I've heard so many positive reviews about it, and I really enjoy reading about Indigenous wisdom and perspectives in the United States, learning about the way the land was, how it has changed positively, but mostly negatively, from the perspective of someone who grew up with the knowledge of how it was before. So this book is a collection of braided essays. It braids natural occurrences and man-made phenomena. It is from the perspective of Kimmerer. She is a professor at the State University of New York. She teaches environmental biology, so a lot of this book is recognizing not only the importance of science in discussing these phenomena, but also how art cannot be, left out of that conversation, and that art and science actually go together. They're not against each other. I found that this book utilized just the right amount of pathos, like appealing to one's emotions, for us to care about these otherwise just natural occurrences that we don't think twice about, such as how corn grows, or, why lakes get all muddled with algae, those types of things. I feel like the average person doesn't necessarily blink an eye at those situations, but the way that Kimmerer describes them allows us to understand and sympathize not only with herself and her experience, but also with nature itself and what it's gone through. I found, like I said, art and science, they cannot exist without each other. I also found she was able to really strike a chord with calling to action to help our environment, to do what we can to help our community, and just start caring for one another, start caring for the environment, the world around us, calling to return to communal care in life, because that is how this land thrived for so many centuries. And she discusses current issues with certain companies, how they are not caring for the environment, and the effect that has, that we may not feel ourselves, but others definitely do. So I found this to be very just insightful, a very necessary read. My favorite chapter was the one where, like I mentioned a little bit, she tries to clean up a creek on her property, and just her meditations on doing so, why she's doing it, what motivated her beyond just giving her family a place to swim during the summer. I thought it was really wonderful, and it took her years to even see an effect of her work, which really shows like how easily things can be messed up and how much longer it takes for it to be restored. So I definitely recommend this. I think that this is, like I said, very necessary for anyone who's interested in sustainability and the environment, in just recognizing the impact that your existence leaves on our planet. Definitely called me to reflect on my, spending habits, my level of consumerism. It's encouraged me to give back. All of these things that we think are so inherent, but sometimes we get caught up in appearances and we don't think about how much we've accumulated until we look around a bit deeper. So I think this came at a very good time in my life, and I will be thinking about this book for a while. Okay, next I read Shelby Van Pelt's Remarkably Bright Creatures, and this was such a delight. Truly, what a wonderful little book. I mean, it's not little. I think it was like 400 pages. Let's check. About like 350 pages. I read it in like 3 days. I found this book to be a lot sadder than I expected. I knew from the cover that it's about an octopus, but the octopus is really the friends we made along the way, the family we found along the way. So basically it follows, there's these vignettes from the perspective of an octopus in this small town aquarium. He's at the end of his life, and he has formed a relationship with the cleaning lady, this elderly woman who comes in every night, cleans the aquarium, talks to all the sea creatures. Her name is Tova. And as the book goes on, Tova's, recognizing her age. She's recognizing that she's widowed. She has her son passed away when he was young, realizing that she needs to perhaps move out of her home and move to an elderly facility. And at the same time, there's this man named Cameron who is looking for his father. So their storylines end up converging in a way that is very beautiful and just very satisfying to read, because there's some dramatic irony utilized in that we know connections that have been made between the characters before the characters themselves know them. So I thought that was done very well. I love to read some irony in that way. And it's just about these characters, Cameron and Tova, finding family and community in a way that is not just blood related, but also within their community. And I also found that the octopus, similar to the way that Dolly Alderton used recipes and emails to kind of break up the essays, I found that the octopus's perspective kind of breaks up the more structured, plot-driven narrative. And I thought he was very clever and very funny. It made kind of an otherwise run-of-the-mill family discovery a lot more unique. Also found it very refreshing that it doesn't shy away from aging or from death. In fact, it embraces it and embraces inevitability and embraces the precious nature of our lives through, an animal, but also through people. So I thought it was a great read. Very, very good for the summer. I know that there is a paperback copy right now that has like fun decoration on the spine, or not the, I don't know, the pages, on the pages. I have the hard copy version, which is, just as cute, but I do like that cover too, or that version. Definitely recommend if you so choose to read a refreshing little number about family and finding community. I ended up getting a bit sick towards the end of the month, so I was a bit bedridden, and I decided to spend my time in 2 plays. So I guess really I read 5 books in 2 plays. But what I really like to do with my plays is I will watch a version of it on YouTube and follow along, because if I just read it, I don't know who's talking. Like, I'm not reading it from like fully left to right. I'm just reading it like the words, not the characters, which might just be a me issue. But what gets me through a play and what like makes it a lot more enjoyable for me is if I watch it. So I first read The Odd Couple by Neil Simon. So I watched a version of this play at a high school. Put it in the description if you so choose. So I found it funny, if not a bit of the time. I believe this was published in 1966 is what it says, by Nancy Enterprises. So The Odd Couple follows 2 divorced men who decide to live together, which at the time, the reason I say that it's a bit of the time is because all of their friends, female, male, find this very strange, and also kind of an insinuation that they are homosexual, which in our time, having roommates, regardless of your gender expression, is pretty normal and almost necessary if you want to have money for other things. So I think the idea of 2 men, they are in their 30s, so that's maybe a stranger idea. They have kids, they are divorced. So that kind of makes it a bit of a stranger and odder setup. But having a roommate no longer implies that you're gay. So that was something that was a bit, interesting. But I still found it very funny. It's set in New York, so it was fun to watch these high schoolers kind of try and do the New York accent. I wouldn't say that the production I watched was like Broadway level by any sense, but I did find it still very entertaining. Honestly, enjoyed it. I don't think it's breaking any barriers with its production, but it's kind of niche, so I was glad to, expand my theatrical knowledge with a fun little Neil Simon play. Neil Simon comedy. And then the last play, or just piece that I read in August, was Paul Osborn's Mornings at 7, which I enjoyed a lot more than The Odd Couple. This one was written or first performed in 1939, so during or like right before World War II, and I found it to be still very I found it a bit timeless in a sense. It's about 4 aging sisters confronting their feelings of stagnancy with their lives, their homes, their husbands. The setup is 2 houses. One has a married couple with one of the sisters. The other house has another married couple with 2 of the sisters, one who never married, never had children. And the first house follows their son Homer, who is a 40-year-old bachelor, but he has a girlfriend. He just doesn't want to move out. He never left home, and it just kind of meditates on that idea of being a mama's boy, how far that can take you. Not very far, come to find out. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting that, in the 30s, they still had that stigma against children not leaving the home, and these untraditional family dynamics before the nuclear family setup really took took off in the 50s. This is kind of a precursor to that nuclear family structure. There was already this judgment against bachelors and bachelorettes, regardless of the age. You know, we have an older woman, we have kind of a middle-aged man, and yeah, I found it really funny, and the production I watched of it was also very good. I'll link it in the description, and overall, I did really enjoy this. I think Paul Osborn did a great job. Maybe I'll pick up another one of his plays. He's written 3 other ones: The Vinegar Tree, Point of No Return, and Tomorrow's Monday. So I just was very captivated by these covers. I think they are just very beautiful. They have fun little Samuel French on the back. So yeah, that is it for what I read in August. I will try my best to make this a monthly video that I make, just for my own sake, to remember and to kind of think more critically about the books that I have read. Obviously, some were more captivating to me than others. Some I didn't really have much to say about. But overall, I think my favorite read of the month was Braiding Sweetgrass, if that wasn't already obvious. And this month, I hope to read the same amount, if not more books, so I have a lot to talk about. I am doing my best to not purchase any more books, because if you know me, you know about how long my to-be-read list is. I'm a bit embarrassed, and I'm not going to say how many books are on it that I own that I haven't read, but it's getting shorter by the day. Okay, I'm doing my best. Thank you so much for watching, if you watched any or all of this video, and I will see you in the next one perhaps. Okay, bye.